Lou, it is good to see you again. We met originally through Cassie Tucker. It's great to see you again and get this conversation going. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks very much for having me on. Looking forward to chatting with you.
So the way that I met you was through originally way back when. If we go back through the Wayback Machine, it's almost like Wayne's World, and we'll go do 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 do. But as we go back there, it was WW or WDW Radio. Why'd you launch WDW Radio?
Because I was a horrible typist, and I still am. So back in 2004, I'm still a lawyer in New Jersey. I've got this Disney thing on the side. I've written a trivia book, and I have a little site coming up, that I'm building up and community. I hear about this new technology called podcasting. I literally asked Jeeves what a podcast is, and I was half kidding, but I knew that the spoken word was way more powerful than anything that I could write. Plus, I'm a horrible typist, so I sort of dove into the podcasting space really early on, like literally, a few months after the technology kind of launched, which is why it's called WDW Radio, because I had to convey that what I was doing was spoken word because nobody knew what a podcast was.
What are some things that you learned early on in podcasting that surprised you, that you think new people into podcasting would be surprised to know right now? So what's something that you learned early on that surprised you that you think would really help some people who are new into podcasting?
I think it is the most authentic medium out there. I think it is. And what I mean by that is, I think there's a level of intimacy with this medium that you don't necessarily get anywhere else, because you literally are in someone's ears. And hopefully this is another thing too. Your podcast needs to be consistent. We are creatures of habit. So if your show comes out on Monday mornings, people are going to look for you to be part of their routine coming out on Monday mornings. And because you are part of that routine, because you are to the morning drive, walking the dog, going to the gym, whatever it might be, there's a relationship. There's a real relationship that's formed. And I've always sort of thought about that one-on-one relationship that I'm building with individual listeners, as opposed to worrying about trying to build on my numbers and trying to sort of get the next person. So really understanding, I think, that the personal connection that you have and should have with each and every one of your listeners.
How have you gotten better at that over time?
Oh, I don't know if I have. I'm hoping I hope that I have. I hope that every day I'm building on what I have learned the day before. I think you only fail when you stop trying. I think everything else is a learning experience and opportunity. I hope that I have continued to improve upon the things that I have always felt were important to my business, trying to exceed expectations, not just because it's my name on it, but because I talk about a brand that does just that. Disney, we love Disney because they exceed our expectations when we go to the parks. And hopefully, there's a Japanese philosophy that I subscribe to, which is it's Kaizen, this idea of small continuous improvements every single day. And that's really what I do. Like, I wake up in the morning and I go to bed at night saying, what did I learn today, and how can I improve upon that?
So what's the difference between going to bed and thinking about it and waking up in the morning? Like, is there a practice that you go through? Or is there a question that you ask as you're laying there just getting ready to fall asleep? And then, here we go. We're talking about the intimacy of podcasting, and now we're in your bed. So what is it? What's going on in your head as you reflect on the day?
I love what I do so much. And this is not a line. Like, this is true. Like, I freaking love what I do so much that I hate when my body sort of gives out at night. It's like, Mongello, you got to just go to sleep. Like, you got to go, because my mind is sort of always going. And I think places like bed, if we're going to be intimate, let's get intimate, right? Bed, the shower, sometimes other places in the, in the bathroom, that we do some of our best thinking, right? Because we're sort of focused on nothing else. And I think a lot of us as entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, it's part of what's in our DNA. We're laying in bed, and it's hard to go to sleep because we're thinking about, what do we do in the day? What's coming up tomorrow? What do I have to do next? Thank God for melatonin, or I would never sleep. But that is, I do a lot of reflection at night and sort of mentally preparing myself for what does the short and long term bring tomorrow morning, and then, the rest of the week, the rest of the month.
When you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about something, do you have a notebook where you write things down? Do you just put it in your phone? Like, is there a practice in the morning? Like, or do you ever, well, actually, let me ask you this question. Do you ever wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, where did that come from? And I've got this thing that I just need to run with.
Listen, as long as we are being fully authentic and transparent, I am not going to lie, man. There are times I have literally run out of the shower and grabbed my phone and dictated into Evernote that, like, this is it. This is the idea that's going to, like, change the world. I know it's very awkward and uncomfortable, but I do. I mean, that's sort of like what happens. And yes, there was a time I used to sleep with a notebook next to my bed, and then I would go back and I'd be like, what did you just write? What is this? I don't even know what this. It's like the episode of Seinfeld where he's trying to write jokes. Like, I have no idea what I wrote, but I do. I live on Evernote, and that sort of has been a godsend, because I will use the scratch pad and just sometimes jot down notes there.
Well, how does that translate to action? So you write something down, then what happens next? Like, how do you go from idea to action?
So that's it, right there. There is the big challenge, and it's been that challenge, that problem, that obstacle that led me to start doing some of the things I do on the business side. I'm not kidding. We didn't talk about this ahead of time. I literally keep on my desk a notebook that I've had for 15 years, because I would take it with me to conferences, and I'd write down all these great ideas, and I'd get so excited, and I'd go home and I'd put the notebook down on my desk, and I would never touch it again. And it would frustrate me to no end, because I'm like, look at the huge nexus between here's the idea and the actual execution of it. That's one of the things I've tried to get much better in doing, really sort of reflecting on, okay, was this crazy shower idea completely ridiculous? Or if not, what are you going to do to start taking action on it now? Because I think that's the big problem that we all have, right? Everybody has ideas, but the actual execution of it is the hard part.
Of the ideas that you have, how many of them, just ballpark percentage, would you say that you feel like you've executed really, really well on?
3. No, I have no idea. I look up at a whiteboard I have on my wall, and if you're asking me percentages, how many are you asking me? How many of the things I have executed on did I do well, or how many of the ideas have I actually executed on? Because those are very disparate numbers.
We're going to hit on both of them. So like, I think one of them is, like, broadly speaking, hey, I've got an idea. And then these ideas just kind of sit out there, and they kind of go. And then there's these ideas that we start turning into action. And then of those ones that we start turning into action, how we flawlessly executed on those, and how do we revisit them, and all of those kind of things. So let's talk first the high level, just because there's this top of funnel activity of ideas that then convert to action. What percentage of ideas convert to action?
Probably a pretty low percent. I think it's probably a flaw that I'm a bit of an overthinker. So I will think something oftentimes to death, and sometimes at my own peril. I think I need to sort of shorten that runway. But then there's sometimes I'll get one of those shower ideas in the morning, and I'll execute on it at night. I'm like, I'm going to try this thing tonight during a live broadcast, and let's just see if it flies. Sometimes we just get those, to use a little Disneyism, a little, one little spark of inspiration, and they pay off. But I think there's also other times that I do, there's an idea that I've had that I've wanted to do for years. And I think sometimes we find, or we manufacture ways to delay it or procrastinate on it or not execute on it. And it's to our downfall. I would rather try it. And if it doesn't work, I can at least check it off the list and see if it's done. But I also want to do it right? I also want to make sure that I'm not just sort of ready, fire, aim. I want to really take my time when I aim.
When you fire and you miss, how do you deal with the failure of that? Like, what's your process there in dealing with the things that you turned into action, but for whatever reason, it just didn't play out the way you expected it?
So I don't use the term failure. If I execute on it, I haven't failed, right? Cool. Because I've tried it. I did the thing. I checked it off the list. If it doesn't make as much money, or it doesn't reach as many people, then there's the learning opportunity there, right? How can I improve upon that? I've only failed for the things that I haven't done, because I just don't know how they necessarily will pay off one way or another.
So so in the testing piece, like, so the trying, and I feel like I'm going to go all Yoda there, do or do not, there is no try, right? So, but is this with the testing, what's your process for testing things? Like, how do you speed up just that piece of taking action and feel comfortable with just going out there and testing? Like it said, I go on a live broadcast and I'm going to go ahead and share this idea and see what happens with it. Is there a process to it, or you just do?
I would love to say that there's a well thought out, fully executed, like Excel spreadsheet process, and there's meetings and all kinds of. 99% of the time, it's not, right? Because it all lives up here in my head. I'm for all intents and purposes a relative kind of one man show. I think the best way that I have found for me to sort of go from idea to execution is to build in accountability, put a date out there publicly that other people know about. Like, and sometimes I'll be very, very vague. Something is coming October 1st. Well, now I've got a date. Everybody's got a date. They know something is coming. Now I've just built my runway, and now I have to get to that point. I think accountability, especially as a solopreneur, is huge, and it's easier to build in. You don't need a mentor. You don't need a team. You don't need a staff. You don't need a VA. As long as you can sort of hold yourself accountable to somebody other than your cat or your mom, I think that's hugely helpful.
Why do you think people struggle with that accountability thing?
Because it's easier not to, right? It's much easier to be like, no, it's okay. I'm working on it. I'm doing my thing, and not have somebody say, hey, you said you were going to do this thing. It's why I think things like mastermind groups are game changers.
Yes.
It was a game changer for me years ago. When I first heard mastermind group, I'm like, I had this weird like Star Trek alien. I'm like, what's a mastermind? I had no idea. But when I got into it, it changed my business entirely because I knew I had to show up. So now I host, mastermind groups for other people because they know that they're going to have to show up, not just for me, but the other people in the group. And that accountability, that weekly accountability, not just project-based or year-based or goal-based accountability is absolutely monstrous.
So let's talk about that. This bringing groups together, like the mastermind, and the thing that you've got. It's coming up on October 1st. Is that right? Is that your date? Yeah. So what do you have coming up on October 1st?
So from September 29th through October 1st, it's 3 days now instead of 2 is my Momentum Weekend Workshop, which literally came from what I talked about before. It came from this notebook, this notebook that I brought with me to conferences, coming home with all the ideas, not executing on them. I'm an introverted extrovert, getting lost in a sea of 2,000 people at a conference that are like-minded, that would be great to meet and interact with, but maybe we're a little shy. Maybe we go by ourselves. So I built the conference I wanted to go to, which was a non-conference. I built a 50-person, 3-day, one-room, no-track event to help people, one, not just learn, but begin to execute in the room on the things that they are learning. You are going to come out of Momentum in a different place. You will have moved your business or your brand forward in a different place than you were the day you walked in. I do a lot of things to help facilitate. I don't even like to call it networking, but meeting other people to help sort of the tide rise for all boats, because I know what it's like to sit in that room and eat lunch by yourself, or sit in the corner and you're sort of in your seat and you get comfortable and you don't move. I'm going to make you sometimes a little bit uncomfortable, but for your own benefit, to help you meet other people that are going to help you move your business forward. I really want, and it has become, and I'm grateful for the people that attend and the speakers and the presenters. It's an event that is meant to sort of be a transformational weekend.
So how can people find out more about Momentum? And I know we've got much more to talk about here, but let's give people a link. Where can people go?
Yeah. So everything I do sort of on the business side is at loumongello.com/momentum.
Why 50 people? Why cap it at 50?
And I know from a business perspective, it makes no good business sense, right? Because I'm sort of self-limiting. I don't have a show floor. I don't have sponsors. So that's not what this event is about. It's about the people in the room. And I want to make sure that I can give attention to everybody. The speakers can give attention to everybody, and everybody can give attention to each other. It is almost like a relative sort of larger mastermind group, because we do a lot of things that are group based and interactive based and helping people find and connect with each other. I've had the same question every year. Why don't you just do it to 100? How about 200? About it? I like 50. I would rather sort of help a smaller group of people in a more impactful way than start to dilute the messaging and impact by increasing the number of people.
We've recently did a little bit earlier this year, a couple of other folks and I will launch an event called Golf and Sales. And we've agreed that we're going to cap it at 20 people. And for that, for the purpose of, if when it's 20 people, there's no place to hide. Like you're there and you're engaged, and it may take a little bit to kind of warm up and feel it, but you're there. And again, you're engaged and you're not going to be able to hide. And it's interesting to hear you talk about introverted extrovert. So what's an introverted extrovert?
It's funny because I talk for a living, right? I was
Yeah.
I was a trial attorney in my past life. So
Yeah.
I was a theater major when I first started college. So there's sort of very outward facing things. But if you send me to a conference by myself and I don't know anybody, a lot of times, it's hard to just sort of walk up to people who are, the cocktail party, right? They're at a cocktail party and they're all talking with each other. It's hard sometimes to walk up and be like, hey, I'm Lou, this is what I do, and sort of inject yourself into a conversation. And because I'm very hyper aware of that, I like to do things and in keeping the group small to help people find each other and to help people make those connections and relationships. And I think when you have a group that is small, right, a 50-person group, I do an 8-person mastermind day on Monday, there's an inherent level of camaraderie and trust that is built into the weekend that I think that you lose when you're in this cavernous, expo hall of 2,000 people listening to a keynote speaker that's up on a platform on a stage and is not just physically distant, but there is sort of a disconnect, I think, when that happens. I don't even use a stage. Like by intent, I don't use a stage. We are all on the same level. And the people who are there presenting and doing workshops and doing panels are people who have sat in those seats. They have walked the walk. So there is a relatability with every single one of the presenters, as opposed to, well, here's this person that's making 8 figures a year. Someday I hope to be like that, but I can't necessarily connect with that person because I'm on a different phase of the journey.
Where does design play into things from your perspective? And specifically design around an event, like going to momentum. How do you think about design?
So again, I think about it first and foremost as an attendee, because I have been in that seat. I still am in that seat. I love going to conferences. I absolutely love going to conferences, and I love learning from conferences and seeing what I think works and doesn't work. And momentum, this is gosh, COVID throws all the numbers off. This is like my 7th momentum. And it's an iterative process, right? I hope to sort of learn every single time. I survey everybody. I talk to people. I find out what works, what doesn't work, what do they like, and what they don't like. So one year might look slightly different than the last. This year, for example, I have less presenters, longer sessions, more workshop time built in, because I want people to really do the work in the room and spend time working with each other. Last year I had, because I want to give more people an opportunity to speak, I had a lot more presenters. I had one presenter that he had asked permission. I was like, dude, you go. He went 3 hours and he could have gone all day and people would have been mesmerized. He was the former head of innovation and creativity for the Walt Disney Company. So he is a brilliant speaker. He's probably the best speaker I've ever seen anywhere. And, 45 minutes into a session, he goes, would it be okay if I went, 90 minutes? Can I go 2 hours? I'm like, Duncan, you go as long as you want. It screwed up the rest of the schedule, but so every year I think is a learning process. And I really listen to feedback from the people who attend.
I really like how you highlighted it's iterative. There's this continuous learning aspect that you embrace. And as entrepreneurs, as solopreneurs, as people who or lead, whether self or others, there has to be this view of continuous learning, because we just don't know what we don't know. what's something in this kind of, let's talk about mastermind first. Actually, we're talking about momentum, so let's stay there. On the momentum side, what's something you know now that you wish you would have known when you first started the event?
That's a great question. What I know now that I didn't realize when I first had the idea is that convention hall food is very, very, very expensive. So I hope you enjoy your $78 turkey sandwich, because that's basically what it costs. Yeah, I think, I think it's a great question. Sort of looking back, what do I wish I would have known then? I think because I thought about momentum for a long time before I sort of took that huge, scary leap of faith and put it out there and launched it. I was, hopefully well prepared. I had a great, system of support around me in terms of the other speakers and the attendees, most of which who come from the community already, right? Because going back to what we said earlier, I want everybody to feel the same way I do. I want everybody to sort of be excited when I get up in the morning to go do the thing that they do. And I'm like, oh, I hate my job. I hate my boss. But I can't wait to go home, and I can't wait for weekends to go work on this thing. Well, we live in a time of tools and opportunity that you can take this thing. And that's why I talk about this idea of turning the thing that you love into the thing that you do. I take that very seriously. And I really want to sort of help people get from point A to point B, because I didn't have that. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have somebody help. I had people like, good for you, go do your little Disney thing. But I didn't have guidance and people to sort of help understand what the mistakes are and with the learning curve a little bit more.
How'd you find your first mentor?
Accidentally, I think. I never sort of sought out a mentor, but there were people along the way. Very, very short, quick story. I went to a conference out in Las Vegas years and years ago. It was New Media Expo or whatever it was. It sort of went through a number of different changes. And there was somebody who was a listener. She and I had been corresponding with each other. I got to the hotel. She literally was waiting like by the front desk, like to meet me and say hi. And I was like, wow, this is great. She's so nice. Before the conference even started, we sat in the hallway for like 4 hours. And I'm not kidding, it's in this very notebook. I took pages and pages of notes. She was super, super smart. I won't say her name, her name was Jen, but super, super smart. I called my wife and I said, I can come home right now. She goes, what's wrong? I said, nothing. I said, I got more from this person before the conference even started. Like, this trip was a win. Like, it was worth the price to get out here simply from that one conversation. And that's when I started to learn, like, I think a lot of times we're solopreneurs. We're doing it on our own. I want to do it on my own. I can't afford to not do it on my own. But finding people, again, it's why I built Momentum this way. Finding people who understand what you do, have advice, can be part of form your own mastermind group even, but having those other people to sort of bounce ideas off of and say, hey, what do you think about this? How can I do this differently? Maybe we don't know it all. We don't, and getting some of that help from outside sources, even without sort of seeking out or hiring a mentor per se, is incredibly, like, that was a literal turning point in my business.
How do you think, how would you distinguish between, I'm just going to throw a couple of words out at you. How would you distinguish between mentorship and coaching?
I never really thought about it, because it's funny because I when I have to sort of think of words to describe what I do, I use them interchangeably, but I don't like either one of them, because I'm not a coach. I think sort of like, a sports coach. This is not a body of an athlete, just so you know, like, so I'm not, I think a coach oftentimes has, these are the ways that you go about doing things. I'm going to teach you how to do it, as opposed to maybe a mentor who works with you individually and you bring to them what you're working on, what your ideas have. I think it's maybe a more intimate relationship, which is sort of why I lean into the word mentor more than I do coach. I don't have a blueprint, a script. These are the things I'm going to teach. It's why I like working with people one-on-one, in small groups, in masterminds, in a 50-person thing, because I want to know what your challenges are. I don't want to tell you this is the thing and now you go execute it and figure out how to mold it to your business. You tell me what your business is, and let's work through these processes and challenges together to sort of really make it personal and customizable to who you are and what you do and what your goals are.
So I'm going to ask another one. How about coaching and training? How would you distinguish between coaching and training? And I know we're getting into some nuance here on these
No,
words, but coaching and training, what's the difference between those two things?
I hear training. I think sign up for my webinar, buy my course, go through this process that has a certain number of steps with a predefined outcome or goal. That's what, and it very much has its place in the circle of life. I think the opportunity to learn from some very, very smart people in the comfort of your own home, on your own schedule, after the kids get to bed, after you get home from work, on weekends, whatever it is changed the world, right, in the past number of years. But I look at training as something that, for lack of a better term, sort of it's off the shelf, right? Something that you buy and you go through, as opposed to coaching is something that is hopefully a lot more personal to you.
And how do you, when, and I love hearing your view on those definitions, just in the different perspective. And I think that's one of the big challenges that exist out there. People, one, struggle with the definition of what each of those things are, but then also struggle with the idea of what's the right tool to help me get from where I am to where I want to be. So like each of those are different. And we're talking about people as tools or things as tools, but each of those are different tools that can be applied differently to help people break through the thing that they're working to break through. And it's I think a lot of people struggle with that kind of stuff. It's, yeah, like I've been, as someone we both know, participate in Lee Cockrell's Mastermind since 2018. I've gone 5 different times, and whenever I have the means, financially to be able to do it, and capacity, time to be able to do it, I'll be in that room. And I learn more from the questions that other people ask in that room than I do from Lee being in that room. But we've all come together for Lee. Now, there are other people who go in there because they want to see Lee and be around him. And I think the reason I bring that story up is everybody has a different perspective, a different need, a different set of needs that they need to draw out. And when you go to that 2,000 person event, which is actually where I saw Duncan speak in November of last year, I saw him speak at a learning conference that we were both at. When you go to that event, you can get lost in the whole thing, and you can feel like you're being talked at, and you walk away with a big old notebook of stuff, and whether or not you open that notebook up again is up to you. And sometimes you won't open the notebook up, but when you're in this smaller group environment, you can start to really get a feel for fit. What are the things that you're looking for, that you need? How has what's your view on fit, given that you do both the 50-person momentum and then you do the smaller 8-person mastermind? What's your view on fit and the differences between the two? How do you think about both of those two components of the event?
Well, I want to go back to a couple of things that you said.
Sure.
One, I think the beauty of having a course, having a mastermind, having one-on-one coaching is people can learn in the way that they are most comfortable doing it, right? It's why I've always created content. I've done audio content, video content, live video, books, magazines, audio tours, because I want to create content in the people way, and so that they can consume it in the way that they are most comfortable doing it. I think the whole same holds true for learning. Some people want to do it at their own pace. I don't want to talk to anybody else. I want to just watch the videos and do my own thing. Some people want to be in a group setting. Some people want to be in a large group setting. So I think that's, by having a number of different offerings, you can sort of find a person's entry point, at least into maybe the ecosystem of what you offer. Going back to what you said for Lee, and what I love about this, and I think this holds true for a lot of events like this, especially where there is a single person who's sort of spearheading it, is you're not just going for Lee, you're going for the people that Lee attracts, right? We are magnets for the kind of people that we want to attract. So Lee is going to attract, most likely, other people not doing the same thing as you, but that are like you. So they're almost sort of pre-vetted before you go into the room. So you're not just paying for Lee, who is obviously worth the price of admission 10 times over, but you're paying to be in the room with those other people as well. And I've known other people who have done Lee's mastermind and have come out the same way. Like, it's transformative, it's emotional, it's, it gets those creative sort of juices flowing and the wheels. And Lee, he keynoted at Momentum a couple of years ago, and it was the same thing. Like, Lee, you've got the floor, just talk all day, knock yourself out, because he doesn't come with slides. He doesn't come with he just sort of talks and does his thing, but the stuff that comes out of his mouth is brilliant.
He's a brilliant dude. I joke with folks about, it's kind of like getting advice from your grandpa. It's your grandpa was from Oklahoma, and has gone through all of the life stuff that Lee's gone through, and what you see is what you get. Like, I think this is the other cool thing about the mediums where we're talking about sharing information. Lee's got a book out. Lee's got the Mastermind. Lee's got podcast. You've got books, podcasts, video, events. When you put yourself out there, you can't act like something you're not, or people will quickly see through it. And they realize, oh, wait a second. When I'm in the room with that person, they're looking over my shoulder to see who's next, or it doesn't match. Like, I've heard them in my ears for years, and then I've met them in person, and now they're a bit different. It doesn't happen when you communicate through an intimate format like podcasting and consistently do it. And then add in this new capability that we have where video has gotten so much easier to get out there, or at least simpler to get out there. How do you think about that whole no place to hide, not only as an attendee, but as the facilitator of the experience?
So I'll contradict that a little bit, because I think in a perfect world, that's what we want.
Okay.
But I think in the real world, and I've seen this happen over and over again, I've witnessed it as a consumer, I've witnessed it in a room with other people, and I've witnessed it as somebody who, so for example, I love the fact that we can connect on social and through podcasts and through all. I'm a handshake and a hug kind of guy. I've done in-person monthly meetups in Walt Disney World since 2008. I love, it's not so people can come and meet me. It's so I can meet you, look you in the eye, hear your story. Thank you for listening. Very quick story. Years ago, I'm at a meeting a month. I'm talking to this guy, and we're chatting. And he goes, I got to stop you for a second. And I was like, what? He goes, I've been listening to you for a long time. Like, I feel like I've known you. I listened to you for years. And on the show, like, you're so, pretend he's not talking about me. He's like, you're such a nice guy and blah, blah. And, I was a little nervous to come to the meet because I didn't know if, like, the guy that I was going to meet here was going to be the same guy that was on the show. He's like, I can't believe, like, you're the same person. I was like, well, did you think I was going to be like, a jerk? And he's like, yeah, like, I've been to places where the person who is the character on the podcast or the character on the video is very different than the person that you meet if you run into him on the street, in the park, signing autographs at a convention. They say never meet your heroes. Not that I'm putting myself in the hero category, but you meet people that you look up to and you've listened to, and then you meet them in real life, and you're like, wait a minute. The person that, and I've seen this happen. Like, I've seen the character that somebody is on video, and then I've witnessed them sort of backstage, off stage, and I'm like, dude, like, this person was just like fawning all over you and telling you how much they love you, and you pretended to be nice, and then you turn around and you like make fun of them, or you act like a jerk as soon as you like get off stage. Like, you are too, and I see why now that guy had that possible perception, because I think that happens more times than not, and more, obviously more times than it ever should.
It sucks when it happens. And I had it happen at the NSA conference that I was at just a couple of weeks ago, where met somebody for the first time, and I got that feeling, that look over the shoulder kind of feeling, and it was kind of like, that doesn't match what everybody else says about this person. Now, they could have just had a bad day. They could have been on stage relative to the thing that they're doing. My view, though, is you have no place to hide, and that stuff can get called out really, really quick. So that, and it's our obligation to be authentic and be transparent and be genuine in the way that we interact with people. And that's one of the reasons why I love having a really good camera and a good microphone, so that when I meet people in person, they can say things like I've heard before, which is, wow, you look exactly like you did on camera. You sound exactly like you do on the podcast, because I'm just me. And I can't be different in the way that I interact with my family, in the way that I interact with clients, in the way that I interact with others. And that's one of I would say one of my bigger challenges is once I get really close with clients, I can be very, very direct in feedback in the same way that I can be with my family, which is part of the reason why my family sometimes wants to get rid of me. But there's this thing that happens. And that's the cool thing about the medium and the cool thing about access of like in events like the ones that you put on and some other people put on is you can actually get access to people directly. And hopefully you're not let down by that experience. But once you are let down, then and you know not to invest. And then I also think it's your obligation to share that experience with others too, and just let people know that wasn't for you. Now that's a test that you do out there. And I think that's one of the cool things about this is there's no place to hide. That green room discussion, other people have experienced that with that person. And I think there's an integrity challenge that exists out there. You got me fired up, Blue.
I'll tell you what I think is the secret. I will give you, if I had to sort of quantify the secret, and it shouldn't be a secret, but it's 4 words: genuinely care at scale. Genuinely care about every single person. Don't tell me you can't do. I don't care how big your audience is. I don't care how big your following is. I don't care how many. What you genuinely care about every single person. There are people I know, going back to sort of looking over the shoulder in lines, that I've seen them at conventions. I've seen them at book signings. I've seen them. They will look the person in whoever is the next person in line is the only person in line, and I don't care if that person has been there for 9 hours. They will stay until they look every single person in line in the eye and give them the same attention like they were the only person there. I'm the same way. I answer every email personally. I will, like, meet of the month, I will try and meet every single person that's there. I will make sure it sounds creepy when I say it this way. I make sure I touch every single person at an event that I host, whether it's a Momentum event or whether it is a Disney event. I care more about the people who are already there than worrying about trying to get the next download, the next listener, the next follow, the next like, the next sale. Because if you do that and you genuinely love on the people who are there, they will become your most evangelical advocates, right? Because I can go out all day and tell people how great my podcast is, how great my conference is. It holds a very different weight if you go out and say, yeah, I met this guy and I loved his conference. I love his show. That's how you grow. And that's how you grow authentically, because you are not sort of trying to just sort of get or sort of lure the next person into your community, but somebody else says, who somebody trusts, says, I know Mike, I've met Mike. You need to go and listen to his thing. You need to come and work with him. That's really what you're trying to build. And you build that by caring at scale.
Yes. And I love the use of the word genuinely care in making that impact at scale. How do you think about impact? Like, what comes to, when I say the word impact, what comes to mind?
I realized a number of years ago, hindsight being 2020, that I've always accidentally been in the business of wanting to help people, right? I was a lawyer first. I did plaintiff work. I wanted to help people who were in trouble. I had a computer consulting company. I wanted to help people sort of improve their business way back when building websites and networking. I know it's really a long time ago, but like networking computers and things like that, I wanted to get them to be more efficient and effective. I wanted to help people have a better Disney experience. I want to help people now pursue their passion and do the thing that they love. And as I think it was, for me, I'll speak for myself, as I started to get older, words like legacy start to creep in, right? And start to think about, like, what is the legacy? What are the footprints I'm leaving behind me? And for me, I realized I just trying to have a positive impact on everybody that I reach, everybody that I touch, whether it's by maybe helping them have a better Disney vacation. Maybe the show makes them laugh if they're having a crummy day. If I'm helping to validate their business idea or, get it to the next level of monetization, whatever that thing is, because I think we have the potential to have this positive. It's like, dropping a pebble in a lake, this positive ripple effect on other people. And that's sort of what I hope to leave behind.
So you mentioned before about attracting, like this magnet of attracting. Who are the type of people that you hope to or want to or have worked toward attracting to an event like Momentum?
I think what I have found is that most of the people come from listening to the show.
Yeah.
So they're in the Disney community, and that doesn't mean that they're sort of hardcore, rabid Disney fans, and that the people who come to Momentum all have Disney-based businesses. 98% of them don't have a Disney-based business, but they have this idea. Sometimes even it's a brick and mortar business. Sometimes they are even not solopreneurs. They are, they have a small, medium-sized business. But the hope is that we're attracting people who want to do good, do things the right way for the right reasons. And what I mean by that is Momentum is not a here's how to get rich quick type of thing. I build my business around the same way I build my brand and sort of the way I am, again, transparent and authentic. And it takes hard work. And there's a lot of discussion and to borrow from my friend Lauren Gagioli's old podcast name, there's an unsexy side to entrepreneurship and solopreneurship and talking about some of the hard things and the challenges and the sacrifices. And if people are willing to do the work and put in the work and are doing good work for the right reasons, those are the kind of people that I hope want to come, not the people who are looking to, get rich quick.
Yeah, it's a good, and the cool thing about what you just described there is people who are genuinely interested in making a positive impact on others. That's what kind of that attraction piece that happens in there. This piece will come out, and I'm just doing it just from a timing perspective. How are we doing in the conversation?
Oh, great. I mean, I think it's great, but it's you tell me.
Well, you're still engaged in the conversation, so that's so I usually look at that as a good thing. Like if there's anything that we've not gotten into that you'd hope that we would have gotten into, or anything specific, and anything.
No, and not to sort of blow smoke, but I got to tell you, man, I love your format. I love the fact that you are not sort of just reading off this list of, well, here's the 10 questions I'm going to ask. And you pay attention to the answers that you're given, and you ask like logical, thought-provoking, and meaningful questions. And I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is life's work to get here. And it drives my family nuts, because I ask them really hard questions that they don't necessarily like to answer. And then they feel like I'm treating them like clients. I'm like, no, I'm just treating you like everybody else. Like I'm genuinely curious.
But that's what you have to do, right?
Yes.
Even as a coach, a mentor, or whatever, you talked about sort of having some very difficult conversations. You're not being hired or paid just to be like, yeah, that's a great idea. That's what your mom and your sister and your wife and your husband are for.
Right.
You're there to say, no, you know what? You're not doing this the right way. You're putting in time, but you're not doing the work. You're not moving the needle at all. Maybe this is not the direction you should be going. It's hard to do that sometimes, especially when somebody comes to you with what they think is going to be their run out of the shower $1 million idea.
Yeah.
But it's your job to say, maybe that's not the right thing. And I know from my experience that it's been tried and it doesn't work, or this is not the right thing for you.
Do you mind if we keep that in there?
Sure.
Okay. So I said we were going to take that out, and then here we go. We kept it. And now you've seen behind the curtain. Oz is coming out. There's levers and dials and all of that kind of stuff. Every once in a while, the editors will leave that
talked
stuff.
About the offline conversations are seamless with the ones that are being recorded, because it's who we are, right? It's
yes.
The person that, this is part of the problem, I think, Mike, is that the person that goes on the air when the record light is turned on is sometimes different than the person when the mic is off. Yeah. And it shouldn't be. It never should be.
Never. That's the thing. One of the things, just as we go deeper into this piece, one of the things is I'm starting to get more involved in paid for speaking, not the stuff that I would have done before, where I would have paid to be in a room to speak, or sponsoring things, or I'm getting brought in because I'm getting a conference fee or those kind of things. It's many people are saying, look, you have to script this stuff out. And one of the things that makes me who I am is I am unscripted. I have stepping stones, a journey that we're going to go through. and we'll get there, and we might get there in a different way than we anticipated, but we will get there, and we will get through all of those things. And we know a number of people in kind of that space who've spoken, or professional speakers inside Disney Institute as an example, and you can time everything that they deliver, and that's not me. And the reason it's not me is because, and there's a time and a place for each of those. I'm going to authentically deliver specific experience in the context of whatever the thing is that we're talking about, because of the ability to learn and listen in conversation and be able to put that around. And if that's not what you're for, then you're not for me. And so I think this is a hard thing that a lot of solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, people who are building their business really struggle with. Is they look at people who say, this is the playbook you have to use. This is how you go to market, or this is how you build this thing out. And then they go and they start testing that stuff, and they realize that it's not for them. And then they wonder, am I less than? And I don't think people should feel less than because somebody else's playbook doesn't apply to their playbook, or because they don't know that piece. So thanks for having this conversation. What do you think? Do you think people struggle with that? Do they feel less than because they're
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, and again, in the interest of full transparency, I've had friends and mentors and mastermind people for years tell me, and I acknowledge, what I do does not scale. One person, I can only coach one person at a time. I can only be in a mastermind, 150 people in a room. I get it. They're like, you need to build a course. You need to build a course. You need to build a course. You need to scale. I'm like, I agree with you 1,000%. 1 year goes by, 5 years go by. It wasn't until, and the reason why was because I couldn't wrap my head around building this thing that was, here is the blueprint, here is the roadmap for you, because everybody's roadmap is different. And it wasn't until I was able to, in my own mind, sort of crack my own internal code of what I wanted to build and offer, to start going down the course building path. It is not meant to be a follow ABC. It's not like IKEA instructions and say, this is what you will get on the back end. These are, it's going to be things that you can take and apply to who you are and what you're doing to help you build your own path along the way, not follow in a road that somebody else has hoed already.
So for those of you who are watching the video, you probably realize that Lou and I are probably relatively similar in age. But when he's describing this, I'm thinking of like Zork, Choose Your Own Adventure books, where I can go. And good. Thanks for laughing. Did you read Choose Your Own Adventure books?
Yeah, man, absolutely.
So like, it was so cool to be able to go through this, and you get to the end and you're like, do I take the red pill or the blue pill? Right.
Yeah.
And depending on which pill you take or which door you open, you go and you navigate a different story. And then the cool things about these being in a paperback version, or most of mine were paperback, but you could, if you made a mistake, you could always go backtrack and then start working your way through. And as entrepreneurs, as solopreneurs, as people who are building businesses, you can't always go backward. You can learn from your experience and then start again in those other areas. And the cool thing is, nobody can ever take that experience away from you if you do the thing that Lou talked about on the front end, which is take action, not just put stuff in a notebook, but actually take the idea and start putting it into action. So do you think about choose your own adventure type stuff when you're doing your course stuff?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. And I think choose your own adventure books and playing computer games and, what you're going to go left, you're going to go right. And I think for a lot of people that's really scary. And I think as solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, we are wandering these often. We think it's going to be this very straight road. I'm going to do this thing and that's going to be the outcome and the result when I get there. And it's not. It's very circuitous. It's like riding Space Mountain. Like, it's dark and it's scary and you can't see what's ahead and your twists and turns, and it's a wonderful adventure, but sometimes you don't know, and there are these forks in the road and you have to sort of decide, which way am I going to go? And I think as long as you go in with the mindset that if I make the quote unquote wrong choice, my adventure doesn't end there, right? It just takes a different path and I eventually go back, onto the other path or get to where this other path was going to lead me. Because I think how we view the choices we make and our definition of failure, our definition of success, for me is not measured in dollars and cents. It's in levels of happiness, which makes me in my own mind very successful because I'm very happy doing what I do. And that's how I want other people to approach it as well. I talk to people, especially when they're starting out on a new idea or a new business, that there's a lot of rules of three that apply. And one of the rules of three I tell them to apply is prepare to do this for 3 years. Like, this is going to be a 3-year journey. So will you be able to sustain it? Will you be able to maintain it? Will you be happy during this time? Will you be happy if you don't make any money during that time? I think we all know that there's a lot of people that start off and especially things like, content creation. They go, wait a minute, I've been doing this for 6 months. Where's my money? It's not exactly how it works. It is very much a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah. Well, so I've been doing the podcast now for 6 years, and we've not monetized the podcast in a 6-year period. I continue to do it because I love it. I love these kind of conversations. And the challenge that I view the success of the podcast through, beyond the feedback that I get from other folks, is that if you've got a question or a problem that you're looking to solve, and you can frame that in the question, the thing that you're actually working through, I can point you to an episode where I spoke with someone about that thing, as long as it's in the context of leadership, culture, revenue, or execution. If it's in those 4 buckets, I can do it. If it's outside of those 4 buckets, I can find someone who has. And that's that whole genuine interest in helping others. Lou, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I'm going to share just a quick story about how I first came across you. It was back in, I think, 2008, when we took the kids on their first Disney vacation, and we were into like Diz boards and the Diz Unplugged and that kind of thing. And you're trying to figure out how do you make sure that when you go on a vacation like this, it's going to be really expensive, that you actually have a good time and don't kill each other in the process. And we came across WDW radio, and one thing led to another. We ended up participating in one of the Disney food blog events at Epcot a couple of years later. And we've done a number of vacations since then. We became DVC members in that time period. Like, all of those kind of things have kind of come together. But you and the people that you've brought on and the conversations you have, whether it's related to the travel partners or the food discussion, informed and helped make some of these trips absolutely amazing. So thank you for doing the work that you did back then. And thanks for being you and being able to, and having this kind of conversation. You introduced us to some interesting things, and I appreciate you. So thank you.
No, thank you. I owe a lot to Cassie to sort of, brokering this introduction, and I love her because she obviously sees, the way we instant sort of rapport and understanding and getting along. And I appreciate that. And I thought about this as we were going through, and I'm going to sort of blindside you with this, if that's okay. If not, you can just cut it out. We talk about sort of being magnets for the kind of people that we want to attract. And I love your messaging, and I love all the things that I talked about, right? The authenticity, the genuineness, just even sort of the way that, we're sort of doing this conversation. I think there's 4 or 5 seats left for Momentum, because I do believe you are a magnet for the kind of people that I would love to have at Momentum. If it's okay with you, I will create a special discount code just for you. If your listeners use Catalyst, you know what? If they use Catalyst 200, I'll let them save $200 off the price of Momentum.
Very cool. So use Catalyst 200, save $200 off the price of Momentum. If this is something interesting to you, take advantage of it, and we'll include links in the show notes. So Lou, thank you for doing that. Where would you like? I know you mentioned loumongello.com. Is that the best place to send everybody to?
Yeah. So everything I do on the business side is at loumongello.com. Everything I do on the Disney side is at wdwradio.com. And I'm at Lou Mongello on all social.
Perfect. We'll include links in the show notes. If you know of somebody who would enjoy this conversation, get value out of the conversation, please share it with them and let Lou and I know, either Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram, wherever you are sharing information. I see Lou on Threads as well. So share it in the social community where you feel comfortable. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?